Hello, everybody. I'm Marky Billson, and I am doing something a little bit different today. I'm putting forth a long form sports talk commentary. There was a program director who has requested that I do so and requested, conversation a little bit about the NBA Finals as well as the Stanley Cup Finals, and I'm going to get to that right away and then talk about some other things that are going on contemporarily. Just to introduce myself, longtime member of the sports media. I'm very proud of my writing career, which includes many years at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It also includes winning awards for writing from the Tennessee Sports Writers Association. It includes covering the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Pitt Panthers. It includes covering the New York Mets as a beat writer for spring training. Might have not lasted a long time, only hired for spring training, but when you are a New York baseball writer, you're at the top of your profession. And lots of magazines and internet, just too much to mention and all that. But what I'm really proud of is hosting a sports talk show in my native Tri-Cities, Tennessee area. Should also point out that I'm not really a native of anywhere. I've lived 18 different places in my life, I think, everywhere from Neuss, Germany to Lake Wales, Florida. But nevertheless, did do a show and lived many years in the Tri-Cities, Tennessee area. Not a good sports town. So trying to create topics and such, it could be somewhat difficult. And oftentimes you brought in an identity. I get a lot of stuff with East Tennessee State, which was the local Division I school there. And of course, they have the NASCAR track, the Bristol Motor Speedway. So of course, we talked a lot of mid-major basketball as well as NASCAR racing. But it wasn't as if we didn't understand that there were bigger fish to fry, and certainly in Pittsburgh, and I'm a lifelong Pittsburgh sports fan, that was something that, certainly, we covered a lot of that, as I told you before. But let's get right into this. The NBA Finals, Nuggets 4-1 over the Heat, and I kept hearing the reason why was Jimmy Butler of the Heat didn't step up. Jimmy Butler didn't step up. Now, why didn't he step up? This is a good question. Because I would look at his numbers and I'd see a guy who averaged 23 points in the regular season, and lo and behold, he averaged 27 in the playoffs. Well, Marky, here's a guy who, what about that turnover that he made in the final stages of the fifth game? I mean, down by a point, turns the ball over, and then when they get the ball back, misses 2 free throws. Well, a couple of things. First of all, I'm sorry, I just don't think that Caldwell Pope's steal is going to go down with Havlicek stole the ball. I just don't. I think that Butler put 10 points in the first quarter. I think that with less than 2 minutes of play, he puts 2 free throws in that gives his team a 1-point lead. I think that criticizing him for missing the three-pointer at the end, a little rough. It's not a 50% shot. I think you're criticizing a guy who wasn't the best player on the court at any time, who played over his head to get an 8th seed into the finals, to get a team who had no business being in the NBA Finals, and you're criticizing him because at the end of the day, in a game that even if the Heat would have won, they still would have trailed in the series and had to win 2 more games. Yeah, it turned out, hey, this was a team that was 42-40 in the regular season against a team with 50-odd victories in the regular season in Denver. So I think that this is a little bit not premature, but poor criticism of Jimmy Butler. Now, I'm not the biggest NBA fan in the world. In my show in Tennessee, I would often ask the question, can you be a political conservative and root for the NBA in this day and age? I'm not sure that it is an everyman sport. when you have Greg Popovich speaking out against, you know, politics and certainly catering to a point of view on the left. And he's not the only coach that does that. And for that matter, LeBron James speaking out and championing leftist politics. And just, it's drummed down your throat if you wish to follow this league, or association as the case may be, that I find it, can you be a political conservative and follow the NBA without feeling insulted at some point? And that's a problem with the NBA, and I think it turns off a lot of people. NBA gets lots of positive press. I mean, networks seemingly fawn all over it, but it still battles baseball for popularity of a distant second behind football. Recently, I saw a poll. What is your favorite sport? Or what do you follow most? And it was stuff like Super Bowl, college football playoff, World Series, Stanley Cup, whatever. And almost 50%, I mean, of all the sports, World Cup, Masters, this sort of thing, what do you follow the most? And football, with the Super Bowl and the college football playoff, took 48%. Over all the sports, MLS, boxing, nobody follows boxing anymore, but MMA, but whatever it was, NASCAR. Now that's incredible. With so much in that pie, that football, college and pro, would take half of the pie. But I think it's really easy to say why. And we could say that it's easier to follow. It's once a week, not every day like baseball, something like that. But it's because football really does cater to every man. Many of these sports have gone on political tangents. I think baseball also has, championing one side of the political coin. At one time, and I think it's why NASCAR became very popular in the 1990s, they catered to the more conservative, or shall I say it was the country boy sport. But I think that you had that in the 1990s. Let's face it, at that time, the championship was sponsored by a cigarette company. You could fly Confederate flags in the infield. And, predominantly you were looking at American cars. There were no Toyotas. It was Ford and Chevy. Hard to get more conservative than that. But as time has gone by, and I think this is one of the reasons why NASCAR has lost some of its popularity, they've gotten away a little bit from that. It was never going to be a sport that really, it was going to be the sport for the country mouse, if you will. It's never really going to take off in, downtown Cleveland, Ohio. I mean, it just wasn't, But it was going to take heart in places like Bristol, Tennessee, and Talladega, Alabama, and places like that, even New Hampshire, as the case may be, or Darlington, South Carolina. A lot of times, south of Mason-Dixon, certainly, but not all the tracks. And it wasn't in Kansas City, Missouri did they put a track. They put it in Kansas City, Kansas. They were going after the country mouse. So you were going to have a fanatical support there, but you weren't going to have a dominant everyman culture. And then when they got away from that in NASCAR, when all of a sudden, well, we can't have our championship named after a cigarette anymore, just 10 years after Richard Petty had put in a full-size ad suggesting that it would be criminal to take away tobacco advertising in NASCAR. That was a full-size ad, USA Today, 10 years prior to the, what was it? It was the Nextel Cup, I'm trying to remember and all that. But then the Cup Series, who's the sponsor this year? We can't keep up. We've forgotten. It's on our fourth, fifth sponsor. I'm sorry. Who on stage one of the race? They've got that now. Point being, they got away from their base. And by getting away from their base, it was not an everyman sport. they lost a significant amount of their base. Talk a little bit more about that. A little bit now I wanted to go to on when we began with the NBA Finals, and I was Jimmy Butler. How can you criticize him? He took an 8-seeded team to the postseason. Of course, the Florida Panthers also were an 8th seed, making the Stanley Cup Finals, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Stanley Cup Finals left a lot to be desired. They didn't have the depth. The games, all but one, were rather uncompetitive. And frankly, Vegas and Miami, that doesn't really sound Stanley Cup to a lot of people. You could probably do it with one location or the other, but two, somewhere, throw Montreal in there somewhere. Just throw Boston in there. Yes, throw Boston in there. Because this was a problem with the Stanley Cup Finals. The Boston Bruins weren't in it after a tremendous regular season. They set the NHL record for victories in a season with 65. They set the record for points in a season. And what happens? They're upset by the Florida Panthers, a very nondescript team, not necessarily deep, not deep enough, perhaps deep enough to win 4 out of 7 games, but not deep enough to win 4 playoff rounds of this manner. And so we did not see the best team win the Stanley Cup. We saw, well, what did we see? Because I'm wondering, with 8 seeds in the NBA Finals and in the Stanley Cup, why are we playing the regular season anymore? I mean, it seems to mean nothing. What is the difference between an 8th seed and a 1 seed in the first round? 1 home game? Big whoop. And it didn't turn out to be all that significant. And so, do I want to see Arlen Hill try to be the journeyman who brings the Vegas Knights to the Stanley Cup, where I'm even told after, the Vegas Golden Knights win the Stanley Cup, what happens? Usually, you'll have this great celebration, and the fans take to the streets, and they jump up and down. And I can remember one Stanley Cup celebration that I was a part of once in Pittsburgh. And I remember it very well. There's a bar district in Pittsburgh. It's called Carson Street. Like I said, I read for the Post-Gazette. Many places I live, one of them Pittsburgh. Okay, Pittsburgh sports fan? Yeah. Penguins beat the Blackhawks in 92 for the Stanley Cup. And what happens? Win the 4th game. Fans, we run out of our apartment and we run down the hill to what was basically the bar district in Pittsburgh. It's called the South Side Carson Street, okay? What a celebration. And kept, it was very much also kept on the up and up. But what you had, I can remember this, is people driving down Carson Street in their convertibles. And just passersby, what we would do, we'd all hop in a convertible. And they'd drive a few blocks, and they'd start turning around, and we'd hop out of the convertible. This is just weird stuff you do when your team wins the Stanley Cup. And then we go to the other side, and we'd hop in another convertible. We go back down the street and all that. We did this for quite some time. But it was that sort of an environment, and dancing in the streets and merriment and, seeing somebody that you knew out on the streets celebrating. There was a girl, you gave her a kiss and all that sort of stuff. It was that sort of an environment. I'm told in Vegas, the environment was, well, okay, great. We won the Stanley Cup. The same environment that you would come out of after watching, I don't know, Siegfried and Roy. Maybe if you had a good day at the tables or something like that, and you ran, but you don't want everybody to know, because you don't want them to know that you have a bunch of money, or something like that. But it was as if, they had so many events in Las Vegas that winning a world championship, after all Oscar Goodman, the mayor of Las Vegas, had done to bring pro sports in and say, we need to have pro sports to be a big league city, it was basically, Yeah, we have great events every day here in Vegas. Okay, yeah. What's that? What's next? We've seen championships before. We've had big title fights here. And I think you have a transient population, people coming from other people. They come from wherever. They come from New York. They grew up rooting for the Rangers, the Islanders, or whoever. They come from, Detroit. They grew up rooting for the Red Wings. My friend who moved from Pittsburgh grew up rooting for the Penguins, whatever. And it just isn't the same. And it's that transient city where, okay, it's an event, and we put on a very good one. It's a winning team. And they've had hockey in Las Vegas for some time. But, it's not everybody in town gets by this. And being an expansion team, too, and a recent expansion team, there's no generational situation. Even if you're a Rangers fan or something, Boston Bruins would be a great example of this. My grandfather rooted for the Bruins. I mean, they told us stories about Eddie Shore, whatever. That sort of thing. The great cup teams of the early 70s and all that. Bobby Orr and it's part of the culture and the lore of the city. It's not the way it is in Las Vegas. Won't be that way for generations. I guess in Miami, there was a lot of discussion of, hey, remember the Rats in 96? Remember the Rats? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But yeah. They at least had one generation of hockey down in Miami where they were able to, sort of capitalize on the team. And it felt like part of the city's culture. Will it ever get that way in Las Vegas? That's one of the things. There's talking about the Oakland A's moving to Vegas. Conversation about an NBA expansion team, maybe. But I would suggest, especially with the A's, if that move does take place, and it seems like Rob Manfred really wants it. I did hear, it's like, well, we'll have a 35,000 seat ballpark. That's not a 50,000 seater. That's not a 45,000 seater. That's a relatively small ballpark. And, well, the people will come, and as part of the events to go to in Las Vegas, are you really going to Las Vegas for a Major League Baseball game? Well, the casinos will comp a lot of tickets. Seems to me that corporations are buying a lot of those box seats up and comping people in every town. It could be in Minneapolis or wherever. And you're seeing a lot of empty seats in those box seats. It's not just in Oakland where they're not drawing 10,000 a game. Oh, they'll cook the books. They'll say that they draw more than that in Vegas if the move happens. But I just, I don't see it becoming part of the culture. I see another Tampa Bay Rays, to tell you the truth, where that's another transient population. The Tampa Bay Rays do not play in Tampa. In Tampa, you know who plays in Tampa? The Yankees. Their spring training stadium is right next to the Buccaneers football stadium in Tampa. You got to go to St. Petersburg for the quote-unquote home team Rays. It's the 11th largest market. Do you see why it hasn't caught on? The fans are there, but how many of them are transient New Yorkers? The team that plays in Tampa, the minor league, Florida State League. Tampa Yankees. Come see the female manager. But seriously, that's one of the circumstances. So I think that, when you talk about what happened, great story, Vegas Golden Knights. This is the way you build an expansion franchise. But it is an expansion franchise. It's in a place with a lot of transients. I say transient, newcomers, grew up elsewhere. Do they really get behind the home team when it takes home a title? And they've proven to stay home when they lose. I'm Marky Billson, come back. We can do another segment later on, tell you a little bit more about, hey, they have just totally devalued the regular season in sports. Until then, we'll see you next time.